Besides a financial advisor, who do you need on your team as you build wealth? Welcome to Beyond the Advisor, the show where we gather members of Gatewood's team of diverse specialists to break down complex financial planning questions. Our goal is to provide education to families and business owners that empowers them to build their wealth with purpose and confidence.
Nina, welcome back.
Thank you.
Another episode. And I want to thank the audience for joining us again today. We're going to continue the conversation talking about the timing, tax strategies, and missed opportunities for business owners and executives. We're going to do it fishbowl style like we did last time. But before we do that, my name is Micah. I'm a retirement plan consultant at Gatewood Wealth Solutions, aka the 401k nerd. I'm joined with Nina Breen.
Yeah.
Do you want to tell the audience a little bit about you?
So I am our senior wealth planner. So I help families navigate their complex financial decisions. And sometimes those families are also business owners.
Awesome. Well, I'm looking forward to it. Should we dive into the fishbowl?
Yeah.
Let's do it. All right. Question 1. Nina, on the personal planning side, what are some financial decisions people delay the longest, even though the timing of those decisions can have a big long-term impact?
That's a great question. And I have a very easy answer to that. That's definitely estate planning. So oftentimes clients will think, oh, I don't need to do any estate planning yet. Like my net worth isn't that complex and I'll get to it one day. And the truth of the matter is almost everyone needs estate planning in some form.
Yep.
So when you're first starting out and you're a young professional, you're an adult. So the first easy would be maybe a power of attorney. So someone to be able to make decisions for you in the event you can't make decisions for yourself. That's estate planning. So we can get a little more complex as wealth grows with maybe a revocable trust, but the power of attorney, the will, healthcare power of attorney, durable power of attorney, all those are really everyone should have them in the event that they need them. Hopefully they don't need them, but in the event that you do, you definitely want to have them on hand. And then trust planning comes next, revocable trust, and then we could spend a lot of time talking about those, but think of a revocable trust just kind of as an extension of you. So it follows your social security number. You still have all control. And then once we get into more complex, we can talk about more advanced planning techniques. But baseline planning is there's never a time that's too soon to do that. And a lot of times people will think, oh, I don't need it. And we always want to have it ready in that event that happens. So I have a story that goes with that. We had a client who had very concentrated employer stock. That's pretty common. You see executives, they get paid in bonuses. Sometimes you can elect to receive it as shares of stock in the company instead of cash. So we had a client who had built up a ton of employer stock over the years. And through those decades of growth, there was a lot of tax consequences if they were to sell. So we get to a point, so you've mentioned before that our founder, we quote our founder saying, wealth is built through concentration and preserved through diversification. And so this was a story of that, where he had built this fantastic amount of wealth, but now it's hard to diversify because we have such a big tax consequence if we were to sell the whole position. So there was his health had started to deteriorate, and it was a very slow deterioration. And so we had some time to put some planning in place. So when an individual passes and holds a share of securities, then at their passing, they get what's called a step up in basis. So essentially, if the stock had been held just by an individual account in his name, he gets a full step up in basis at his passing. So then his wife has no tax consequences to diversifying and protecting her future from that concentration risk. So it's a really neat planning technique, and we were fortunately able to implement before he passed. And so that left his wife in a much better position than if he had maybe just kept it in a joint account. Then you only get a half step up in basis. So I would say that's the one that people delay, and it's the one that isn't as fun to think about for sure, but you've been working so hard to create this wealth, and you also want to make sure that it passes in the most effective way possible. Yeah,
no, it makes sense. Something I don't know the answer to. When should somebody even start thinking about a trust, right? I think there's estate planning, this broad term, and you did a good job of pointing out all the different parts in that. So thank you. But when should somebody go from just like a will, basic power of attorney, Maybe they did it ChatGPT. Maybe they paid somebody or not, right? But when should they hire the big guns and consider a trust?
Yeah. So let's talk through that a little bit. So a will does not mean you don't pass through probate. So that's a common misconception. And a lot of times you're talking about just your planning and someone will say, oh, well, I'm covered. I have a will. But the will automatically passes through probate. It's a function of probate. So the will is something that we never actually want to have to use. Ideally, even very young and new professionals or young new families would also hold a revocable trust. They'd create one because the revocable trust doesn't pass through probate. So the revocable trust says how assets should be distributed at your passing. And so it really is pretty basic when you think about it. And anyone who's amassed an amount of wealth or owns a home, those are things that can be held in revocable trust.
Okay. Thank you. That makes sense.
You're welcome. All right, we'll go on to your question. So when you first review a company's retirement plan, what's the biggest sign it was designed quickly just to check the box instead of built strategically?
Ooh, great question. I think if I see cookie cutter plan features and a lack of alignment with the business's goals or no goals, right? If I'm looking at the plan and I ask the business owner, what's the goal that you had in mind when you set up this
There's
plan?
A goal?
Exactly. If he doesn't know or he doesn't have one, that's a good sign that it was probably designed to check a box versus being used as a strategy or a tool. So it starts there. There's a few examples that come to mind. A lot of times when I'm looking at a plan, I'm looking at, is it a safe harbor plan? And we covered that at the last episode, right? But that's a key way to add value immediately if the 401k plan doesn't have that feature turned on. Mm-hmm. The second would be, especially for those business owner clients that we have, are they maximizing contributions for themselves? One huge way to do that is through a profit sharing plan design feature that is called new comparability. Mm-hmm. It's a really powerful tool and provision in a plan that basically allows you to group different employees into individual buckets within the plan that allows you to customize who gets what.
Interesting.
Now, exactly.
I thought it was all or nothing.
It is not, which is why we tend to be in this lane where it's not cookie cutter. But there are rules. Those tests that we talked about come back into play with profit sharing. So you can't do whatever you want. But new comparability is one of those ways to give you more flexibility. And a lot of times it's a way to get the owners to max out. So that's one key thing. And then another seemingly small thing, but can be a big thing, is if I look at the plan's eligibility and entry date requirements. So that's when somebody's even allowed to participate in the plan. We call that eligibility. And then once they've met those eligibility requirements, when can they actually enter the plan? Mm-hmm. So sometimes that can be immediate, right after eligibility. Sometimes it can be the first of the month or even quarterly, right? So we would look at those in the document to say, does that align with the type of business or industry that this company's in? Mm-hmm. And a lot of times if it's not, so for example, if they have really high turnover and they have immediate eligibility and immediate entry, well, that's a good sign that they maybe set this plan up without thinking about the impact of having eligibility be set up right away. Mm-hmm. Or the counter to that, you have a professional services group, lawyers, for example, or doctors, where retention is really low. They don't have a lot of turnover, but yet they have a 1-year wait and they're having a hard time recruiting doctors. Well, let's make it easier for those doctors that you're trying to bring in.
If we're not worried about them leaving.
Exactly. So that would be an example of, again, I'm looking at the plan. This clearly wasn't set up to fit the needs of the business. So any one of those reasons would be things that I look at the beginning, but really at the end of the day, I'd start with what's the goal? Yeah. And if we don't have an answer, that's probably a red flag. So
it probably wasn't thoughtfully designed.
Exactly. So, all right. Are you ready for your next one?
I am.
Okay. If I can grab it. All right. When a major financial decision happens, like selling a business or having a big income year, what problems arise when that decision isn't coordinated with the rest of the financial team?
Okay. Great question. I wouldn't say it's so much as problems as I would say it's kind of missed opportunities. So there's a lot that happens at the sale of a business. So we're looking at the culmination of the creation of something, right? And we're going to be selling it either to a third party for likely a large sum of money, or we're going to figure out a way to pass it to the next generation. in a succession or a business partner in a succession. So there's all kinds of different ways. There's so many choices to make and ways to design it that oftentimes that's what's being focused on. And so if you're the business owner, that's your primary focus, is how I sell this business, to whom and how. And there's definitely opportunities that can be missed if you're not also working with a good advisor. So the biggest one is if we're going to have a large income year, so maybe we've been building this business, we've been putting a lot of money into it, but it's also grown quite a bit. So we're going to have some form of taxation on the transaction.
Right.
Maybe it's a bigger income year than most years that you've seen. And so if you're charitably inclined, for example, and you're giving money to maybe your church or something each year, then what we can do is we can fund what's called a donor advised fund and lump together future gifts all into one transaction so that you get the full deduction in that calendar year while your income's high.
That's pretty cool.
So it's a really neat opportunity if it fits into the plan. But you're probably not going to be thinking about that if you're just a business owner that's not working with an advisor. You're going to be focused on your transaction, which is where you should be focused. Right. But having good help can really help get those opportunities and take advantage of them.
Right. Can you talk about, a lot of times I'm talking with business owners that are thinking about selling their business. Mm-hmm. How soon in advance of that should these conversations take place? Because I know it's never soon enough, right? But is there like a rule of thumb with, hey, we need to know a couple years? Like, how do you think through that?
Honestly, it can be as early as 5 to 10 years
from
departure.
Early. Okay.
So and it's really the more you plan in advance, the more options you have and the more thoughtful you can be in that exit. So if you're a business owner and, you're starting to look down the road, the first question is, who are you passing it to? Right? Are you selling it to an outside party? Are you selling it to a business partner? Are you selling it to, a relative?
Right.
Is it going to go to your next generation?
Right. Mm-hmm.
If that's the case, then how? Because it's hard, and especially with the generational transfer, I would say that's one of the most difficult and complex, because you want to give your children a very fair price. Right. But usually you want to give your children a very fair price, but you've also spent all of this time creating and building and investing into this business. Right. And like we talked about before, that's likely the majority of your net worth. Sure. So you have to get what you've put into it and then some with the growth to be able to then turn around and fund your retirement. So it's this catch-22 of, I want my children to get a good deal, but it can't be at the expense of your own retirement, and trying to navigate what that looks like. So it takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of time. And you can also, there's a lot of people that can help you in that if you've got the time to think about it and plan it ahead. And so there's full, attorneys that help with the business exit planning. There's advisors. We have advisors in our office that focus on business exit planning. And so really just trying to be thoughtful as far in advance as you can really usually create the best outcome.
Thank you. That's really helpful.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
You ready for your next one?
Let's go. Let's dive in.
So many owners assume retirement plans are mainly about helping employees save. At what point does the plan actually become a powerful tax strategy for the owner?
I think it gets back to what we talked about a little bit ago, is what's the goal of the plan? Does the owner even have a goal, right? Mm-hmm. Starting there. And a lot of times it's, they're in the middle of their career. They've been focused on the business, to your point, at the expense of their own planning and their own retirement goals. So a lot of it's just coordinating, even with you on the financial planning side and the CPA, to narrow in, how much should he be putting in the plan? Is the goal to max him out? The second would be, is the business looking for tax deductions, right? Like we talked about earlier. Are they running up against issues where they need to reduce their taxable income? Well, a retirement plan is a great way to do that. Mm-hmm. Do they have key employees that they're trying to retain and do a little bit extra for? Another way to enhance tax benefits due to the contributions going into the plan. Mm-hmm. So there's a bunch of conversations that need to take place before you even consider, the action item or the strategy that goes in. But I think it's when you start fleshing out those goals, when you and I start collaborating and are aligned on the business's goals and the owner's goals, we can then come up with a strategy that makes sense to turn the plan into a tax strategy or tax play as well as benefiting employees.
Okay.
So that's where new comparability profit sharing comes in, where, a lot of times we can max out the owner, give him or her the max IRS contribution, while also giving almost like a separate bonus outside of a cash bonus directly in the 401k plan. And the nice thing about doing it in the 401k instead of doing cash for like a key employee is there's this thing called a vesting schedule. Vesting is basically, think of that as an employee's right or ownership percentage of those funds. And the nice thing about profit sharing is you can have that go out all the way to 6 years, meaning it can be yet another incentive that the business gives those employees to stay at that company longer. And if they leave before that window, that money goes back to the forfeiture account, which is just a holding account in the 401k that the business can then use to offset future contributions.
Got it.
So a lot of times owners like that because they're like, oh man, that's a big number. I don't love that. And what if they leave? Well, it's okay. If they leave, we have vesting. They would have to stay the full 6 years before they're fully vested.
They're actually incentivized to stay.
Exactly. So at the end of the day, it comes down to having a goal and then using the plan structure and the design to build contributions that align with the business and the owner's goals.
Makes sense.
Yeah. Awesome. You ready for your next one? Okay. All right. Pivoting to markets. We haven't talked a lot about markets, so this is a shift. When markets get volatile, that never happens, or uncertainty increases, what decisions are clients most tempted to make that you usually advise against?
Okay. The most common would be trying to move to cash. So I
fear
think
selling, right?
Fear selling.
Okay.
Yeah. So they see the markets take a tumble and they think, oh my gosh, I just need to stop the bleeding. I need to make sure I don't lose any more. And the markets don't lose people money. What loses people money is if the market's down and they sell. So if you've got the time to stay invested, historically, the markets continue to go up. So we liken it to, a yo-yo while walking up a mountain. Sometimes the yo-yo's down, sometimes the yo-yo's up, but the standard trajectory, if you look at historical performance, is that the market generally moves up. So when the market's down and you try to sell, you do sell, you lock in those losses. So that's the first part that can hurt your financial plan. But the second piece is, when do you get back in?
You try to time it perfect, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And so think if you're on the side of a pool and you're like, I'm going to jump in, but it's a wave pool. I'll just get the next wave. And you're kind of like, oh, and it's hard to get back in. And so that can be similar to the market. So it's hard to get back into invested when where you want to be long term, because these are not funds you need for the near future. So I think that helping clients understand the planning that we've put in place that might allow them to weather that storm. So when we look at the financial plan, we call it Fortress Gatewood. So our baseline is we like to see, roughly 2 years worth of cash needs in set aside or first of needs is just set aside in cash. And then we have between 5 and 8 years worth of expenses set aside in fixed income. And then the rest is in equities, generally speaking. So we have that cash buffer that's what we would spend down first in a downturn. And then we have the fixed income, which historically doesn't move as volatile as the equity markets. So there will be movement up and down, but historically it's not been the same level as the equities. So we could likely draw down those next over those 5 to 8. And then that preserves the equities so that they can have time to recover.
Are there any particular stories or examples that you can think of? Like somebody calls you, they're freaking out, the market's down, their account's down 10% as an example. Walk me through how you would talk to that person that's going through that. Yeah.
So hopefully we can lean on the planning that we've done together. And so I have a story for that.
Okay.
So
I like stories.
We had a client who was an executive and she retired right before COVID hit. And then obviously once the COVID-19 pandemic showed up, the markets took quite a tumble. So the markets were down quite a bit, and that can be extraordinarily scary when you're a new retiree. So she called and was, do I need to beg for my job back? What do we do?
Scary.
And, we got to say, we've put a plan in place for this. We've got cash set aside to weather the storm. You've got a fully funded cash hub account. And, we've got time to let this recover. And so it recovered.
That's awesome. I always like to say confidence in the plan, not the market.
Yes.
The market will fail you.
The market will fail you.
Your plan hopefully is solid. So I like that.
You can expect a market correction as often as your birthday, 10% downturn,
That
generally
often?
speaking.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, can we talk about something more positive?
Let's see.
Okay.
Let's see what your question is. It's not so positive.
Wah, wah. Come on.
So building off of that, when the market is down, what are some things that you can be talking with business owners and their employees about from your end?
Yeah. A common thing that happens when the market goes down is participants call, and they're often asking, how do I move all of my money into the stable value or a money market fund, right?
Stop the bleeding.
Exactly. Stop the bleeding. And often my first angle is to educate and to pull up their account, look at what funds are in. Most employees are in what's called the target date fund, which for our audience is a diversified investment based on your age.
Okay.
So it's actually really cool. So a young employee is going to be put in a fund that's higher stock, higher equity. And as they age and they get closer to retirement, the equity allocation is going to go down.
Okay.
And over time, the fund's going to become more weighted towards fixed income and less towards stock.
Okay.
And it does that automatically. And those funds are diversified across different asset classes and styles. So it's really a pool of funds that's automatically rebalanced and managed for that employee. So a very simple, emotion-free investment option. So assuming they're in a fund like that, and that participant calls me, I get to remind them, look, this is going to happen, to your point. It's going to happen.
Market's going to go down.
All the time. The good thing is you're in a fund that is diversified to protect you against some of the volatility over time that is inevitably going to happen. And I love during my education meetings, I pull up a graph or a table, and it has all the different asset classes and how they performed by year. The quilt. Yes, you've seen it. You've seen it.
I love the quilt.
The blanket chart, right?
Yes.
Well, I always tell people, I ask, does anybody notice a pattern? And I pause, and everybody, inevitably, there is no pattern. They can't find it.
Because it's just different color squares.
Exactly. It's the rainbow.
Scattered.
Exactly. Every year, it's a different asset class or style that's outperforming another, which emphasizes the point of we need to be diversified. It's really hard to pick the right one at the right time, to your point. So therefore, we need to be exposed to a broad diversity of asset styles and classes so that when it does happen, we're not exposed to one area that really gets hit. So I remind them that they're in that type of fund for a reason, and they have a long time horizon a lot of the time. A lot of times it's a middle of the career professional that's in their 30s or 40s, and I get to remind them that you're planning to retire in your 60s. You have a lot of time to recover, even if you do experience a small setback. I will say it gets harder, as you know, when you have that conversation with an older employee, because it is more sensitive. They are closer
they have
to
less
their
time to
exactly.
recover.
And it does take a toll. So I think it's important too, as advisors, that we listen, we're empathetic. It is going to be different depending on where people are at, but to reassure them of their diversification if they do have it, and to be a resource if they have questions. The last thing I'd say, what you should not do, that I see sometimes people do, is they request a loan or a distribution. And a lot of times they don't remember certain rules or penalties that they can face if they do that. So for example, if you are under the age of 59 and a half and you take a distribution out of the plan, even if it's allowable, like a hardship distribution, they will be charged a 10% early withdrawal penalty on top of any ordinary income tax that they're eligible for to take that money out of the plan. So it can be a substantial hit to their retirement balance if they're not careful. And then on the loan side, some 401k plans, as an example, allow for employees to take loans out of the plan. Well, you can take it out of the plan, but as you know,
the fine print.
Exactly. Know the fine print. you are going to pay yourself interest back, but that money is out of the market. So you're losing the opportunity for recovery or rebound, especially if somebody were to take that loan when the market is down, right? That's probably not the best time to do it. So you just have to be aware. And again, part of our job as advisors to educate employees and owners as they're having those conversations and making those decisions to make sure that they understand the risk, the pitfalls that they could fall into if they're not careful.
Yeah. Awesome. All right, let's see if the next one's a little more positive. So continuing on that theme, when you're working with business owners and employees, how do you help them structure the portfolio and make sure that they're well protected within their retirement plan?
Yeah. No, it's a great question. I think it comes down to giving them the right amount of options without overwhelming them, right? Because when designing a 401k portfolio or a list of fund options, it's quite a bit different than just working with one person, right? Because for that one person, you know their risk profile, their age, their broader financial plan on your side of the house. Whereas when I'm designing an investment lineup, or Gatewood's investment committee is, I should say, we're really looking at designing a portfolio of options for the average employee across different stages of their career.
Could have all kinds.
Exactly. And we do, but the right amount, because we don't want so many where we have people in decision paralysis where, we've got 80 funds in the lineup and they have no idea what to pick. So we try to keep it fairly condensed and lean to help guide them into the right option that's appropriate for them. The other thing would be to make sure that you have an appropriate default fund.
Okay.
And this is an area that can be different from plan to plan. Our philosophy at Gatewood is to have a target date fund. And generally speaking, it's a passive or an index-based target date fund. So low cost. A good way to think about target date funds is early in your career, when you're young, it starts really aggressive, high stock exposure.
We got a lot of time.
Exactly. A lot of time horizon. So 90+% equity stock. And then it's automatically going to decrease that equity exposure over time as somebody ages and approaches retirement. It's really cool. Before they existed, it was really on the individual or working with their advisor to have a rebalance schedule and a diversified portfolio with individual funds. You can now get that same experience of a managed account in one fund in a target date fund that rebalances over time. So it's really cool and really powerful. And that's the default fund, meaning if an employee enrolls for the plan and they don't make a choice, they don't know what to pick, it's going to automatically default them into an age-appropriate target date fund based on their age.
So it doesn't accidentally end up in all cash.
Exactly. We avoid that issue, right? At worst, if they don't make a decision, they're at least well-diversified based on their age for a very low cost. So I love that. So having an appropriate default fund that we feel good about is key. And then beyond that, to your point, offering options across different asset classes. So we call it our evidence-based lineup, meaning almost every style. So think large cap, mid cap, small cap, international, fixed income. We have a passive option in every single one of those boxes. So think of an index fund, right? And that's because it's really hard in most asset classes to beat the index over time. It's really hard for the active managers to do that, which is why we don't have as many of the active options. But there are a few areas that the evidence, hence the name, would suggest that it's appropriate to have an active manager. So those areas for us are small cap value, large cap growth, international, and fixed income. And the reason we picked those categories is because the research would suggest that those are asset styles and classes that have been able to outperform the index in a meaningful time period. So again, more targeted in providing those options because we don't want to overexpose people to expensive high-risk funds, but giving somebody that likes investments or works with an advisor options to work with in the event they decide a target date fund's not for them. So that would be the biggest thing is the right amount of options, a mix of passive index funds and actively managed funds, and a really strong default target date fund.
And so that's all super helpful, and I love all the options, but how do you help them understand? Because what you just walked through could be very complex, and it can, even with the very thoughtful chosen options, I feel like it could probably be overwhelming as an employee. So tell me a little bit about the education you do.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And I always say what I love about my role is a lot of times I'm the first interaction an employee has with a financial advisor, right? They're early in their career or even the mid. They've never talked to a financial advisor before. So all of this is foreign to them.
Brand new.
Exactly. And it starts with just having a conversation, learning about their goals, learning about their risk profile. There's certain questionnaires that we can provide them to kind of guide them into their risk profile to get a better idea of that. And then if they are interested in a broader conversation around family financial planning, maybe they inherited money or they really want to think about their retirement planning now at an early age, we can engage that conversation. But most of it is just around educating them on the options. So I always tell people, think of target date fund as emotionless, hands-free, easy button, right?
Got it.
If you like that, that's a great option. If you like investments, something that you enjoy and you know a little bit about, or you work with a financial advisor, you might consider designing your own portfolio instead of a target date fund, using the different options. For some of our plans, we also have a third category called fixed allocation, risk-based funds. Just think of those as like, instead of the target date fund adjusting the allocation of equity over time, it's static. So you would pick, Nina, I want to be an aggressive growth fund. Well, that's going to be probably 100% equity, and it's just going to stay 100% equity. So again, it's going to rely on the individual to change that if there ever comes a point in time where they're not comfortable with being exposed to 100% equity. So it can get complicated. The biggest thing is we're available to the employees 24/7 throughout the year.
That.
They can schedule a meeting on my calendar at any time. We also do on-site education meetings at least once a year for our clients. And then, as you know, at Gatewood, we have articles, blogs, webinars,
all kinds of resources.
Right? We're doing it now. So we're trying to meet them where they're at is the key, is meet employees where they're at. Everybody's different. So
wonderful. Well, this was fun. Thank you for joining me for another podcast.
Thank you, Nina.
And if you enjoyed watching us talk about taxes and timing and missed opportunities, please subscribe to our podcasts where you can continue to see our future podcasts. And if you'd like to learn more about anything that we talked about today or set up a retirement plan with Micah, you can go to gatewoodwealth.com. Learn more.